But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's be at it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
Let's see now. Ah, there we go. Now I see sound. Yay! If it's not one technical difficulty, it's another. As soon as I started the show, OBS decided not to use my microphone. Like, what the hell? Oh well. Welcome to Technical Difficulties with the Badgers. Otherwise known as What Need is Modern Psychology Ignoring in Boys? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And tonight, if we don't have any further technical difficulties, after Discord decides to update at the stupidest time and OBS decides to change all my settings, we're going to continue examining this 1960s case study that we began looking at in September. But before we get to that, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, we've been looking at this video for a couple of shows, and something that I kind of thought of. Much of the field of psychology has historically been about the study and practice of identifying and meeting human needs where deficiencies in a person's experience have led to maladaptive behaviors, like the violence that's being addressed in this boy, or, social withdrawal, addiction, all the different things, criminal behavior. A lot of those come from, either deficiencies in people's experiences or things that have happened to the individual where they've experienced something they shouldn't have, something like violence in their home and so on. So this necessarily involves understanding childhood development. And it's known today that quite a bit of what happens to you health-wise as an adult is related to your early childhood development and your early childhood experiences. They've found, for instance, that living in a violent environment will actually shorten the telomeres of your DNA. They're sort of the cushion that keeps your DNA from making bad copies. And as you age and those get shorter, you are more and more likely to have tissue that is dysfunctional, tissue that is, like, maybe your connective tissue is not as stretchy and not as flexible. It's why you get skin wrinkles and stuff like that. It's why you get joint damage as you get older. And those things happen sooner to people who have grown up in violent environments than people that didn't. So there's a lot that happens in your childhood that has impact well beyond what we would have expected if we'd never studied it. And in this case, they're looking at childhood development in the same manner. But what did 1960s psychologists understand specifically about boys' development that the field is missing today? And so we're gonna continue to look at how the psychologists were advising the boy's mother, and see if we can ascertain that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the video. Are you guys, Mike and Lauren, are you guys able to see the live stream?
Yes. I think
Okay.
so.
Yep. Good.
Seeing this guy doing his O face right now, right?
Right. I'm about to to hit play. And it should...
Facts are one thing,
There we
feelings
go.
another. The doctor must see the problem as the mother feels it.
I'm trying to get at your feelings, and you seem to be hiding them and covering them up. Because I would expect that you would be either very angry with your husband or very sad and hurt that you lost because you said you don't like to be a loser.
No, I don't.
Well, what happens when you are a loser? Because here is a situation where you are a loser. You've been a loser with your 6-year-old child for a long time. That's what you're telling me.
When I lose,
Your
when I say
boy's
something...
gone out skating. He was supposed to stay in bed. Your husband let him go. And you lost on that occasion. What is it that you're feeling inside you?
Perhaps sadness?
Sadness more than anger.
Yes.
Which hurt?
So there we have parents not being on the same page with regard to the child. And that one kind of strikes me because my husband and I are parents. When we have that happen, like, we have to talk it out. I learn why he's on a different page than I am, and he learns why I'm on a different page than he is. And there's been times in our history, as our kids were growing up, that I was wrong and had to say, okay, yeah, you're right. I can't argue with that. And then there are times when there were things he didn't know, or things that I was able to draw to his attention that he thought, well, maybe My idea was better. And so we've compromised back and forth on stuff like that. And the kids did see us doing that back and forth. Like that's something that you need your kids to know, that you're considering the consequences of your decisions regarding their permissions and their behaviors when you make those choices, so they understand how and why you're parenting them. And as they get older, they need to know more and more of that, so that they know your decisions aren't arbitrary, because it teaches them that as they get older, their decisions should not be arbitrary. And it sounds like these parents are not communicating. So what does it teach this boy?
Not to communicate.
Well, and how should his decisions be? Their decisions look arbitrary to him. Don't you think it makes it apparent that decisions are just an arbitrary thing, that his behavior can be chaotic, and it's normal for that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Kids learn early on how they can manipulate, or who they can manipulate in their situation. It's how kids operate.
Yeah.
And if they sense weakness in one parent over the other, then forget it. You're a lost cause right there. And if you can't sit down and come together with the other parent of this child and, really talk about this stuff, then what kind of service are you doing for that child? That's not really raising him. He's just existing at this point.
Yeah.
And sad.
Yeah, and I look at this, and the doctor had previously, just remember we looked last week at the doctor explaining to mom there that she needs to model processing and regulating her anger, like processing it and regulating her behavior based on it. I would think, because the kid has to learn that mom can be angry and still love him, and his behavior has an effect on the people around him. Look, it made mom angry, right? But he also has to learn that mom and dad can be angry at each other and love each other and negotiate to work out what it is they're angry about or sad about. And if she's masking her feelings about everything and not communicating, in an effective manner, like women seem to have two modes in this. They say nothing and they get passive aggressive, right? Or they nag. And there's no in between there, where like a guy would say, hey, I have a problem with this because these reasons and these potential consequences, of these reasons, and it gets discussed. Whereas a lot of times women will be just like, I asked you not to do that. How many times do I have to say blah 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 blah? And it's not a discussion. It's just nagging. So I kind of wonder where we're going to go with this. Let's see, we get started here.
Hurts more.
Sadness.
Is your sadness deep down? Is it close to the surface? Have you ever cried?
Regarding that, no. The only time I was very upset was when I was phoned from the school to say that they thought he was much better off not to be there any longer. And it was the way that it was put to me that was... it was just out of the blue. I was just phoned to say that the child was not adjusting and he was disturbing the class, and it was very put to me very badly, because it's not a teacher's place to phone, it's the principal's place to phone.
She just kind of changed the subject there. Like, they were talking about her and her husband, and she was just like, let's go off and talk about the school.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think this is part of the reason why they say that you shouldn't, raising a single child is not really good for a child. And I kind of get it, because if you have more than one child, you kind of get to see how your children interact with other children. You know, if you just have this one child and you have two adults, they don't really, I think, know how to relate to the kid, you know, and he just feels misplaced.
Yeah, you get quite
I
a
don't
bit.
know. Maybe.
Yeah, you do get quite a bit of we've never done this before, and we don't know what we're doing, you know, with an only child. And a lot of times when you have multiple kids, everything that you experienced with the first child, you learn, you land on your feet more with the next one and the next one. And I kind of had both experiences, because, you know, I was pregnant with my son when step parenting my two daughters, and so I learned a lot, and I knew those kids prior, so I saw them growing up, and I saw the kids of my peers. Like, I was one of the later peers. I didn't have my son till I was 27. So I got to experience my friends' parenthood, and it was a little easier for me because of that, right? But there were a lot of firsts for me with him, partly because, you know, I mean, you're not there all the time with your friends, and so we had both. You know, my husband had experience. That's the other thing. You know, I said sometimes he was right and sometimes I was right. There were a lot of times where he was right, not as many times where I was right, when we were not on the same page right away with what to do in a given situation, because he had experience that I didn't have. And I don't know if a lot of women are equipped to respect that. You know, I actually had it put to me by my mom. You know, your husband has had experience already raising two kids. If you guys aren't on the same page on something, consider he might have already experienced it. And I think a lot of women don't do that. And like, this woman may not have, you know, she may not be considering her husband's understanding of what it's like to be a little boy.
Yeah.
And she also appears to be uncomfortable discussing their relationship with this doctor. Which, again, like, that seems to be a feminine thing, and it might be because she doesn't want to hear that she's too strict.
Yeah. But I love the way that the doctor framed it when he was calling her a loser.
Yeah, I know.
I'm guessing it wasn't used as a slur in the 60s like it is nowadays.
No.
I mean, just to put it so succinctly, you know, and I don't think she had really thought of it that way before he posed it to her in that way. But you could tell by the look on her face, she didn't disagree at all. She just kind of took it on board. And I think he was really spot on there, you know. But I think a lot of, you know, women need to hear that. They need to hear when they're not doing something right. And I think maybe that's another thing that her husband doesn't do. Her husband probably is too afraid to, you know, voice his own opinions or say, listen, maybe you're not doing this right, or maybe there's something different that we should be doing. I don't know if he has the backbone to stand up to her and say something, because I think they're both in a place where maybe they just don't want to upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
You know, and that's pure speculation on my part, but that's just the vibe that I get.
Yeah, well, and when you have a woman who is overly reliant on restraint in situations where she's dealing with adverse emotions because of the circumstances or because of an interaction, to where she fails to communicate with the other people in the situation and try to resolve the situation, and instead just holds it all in and seethes on the inside and lets the situation run her over. you end up with this. This is one of the reasons why 70% of divorce is initiated by women, because a woman will go 10 years just absolutely hating something that you do, and if she's like this woman, she will not tell you for 10 years how much she hates what you do, and then all of a sudden, year 10, she comes along and she's like, I want a divorce. You have not stopped doing this. Well, how the hell were you supposed to know?
Right.
And so we'll see what the doctor here has to say.
Putting emphasis on protocol, who should call you, I think you're trying to avoid the catastrophe that your child was expelled from school.
Well, expelled, yes, but expelled usually expel thieves and.
Well, expelled means being
horrible. I mean, it wasn't his fault that he was asked to leave because he wasn't handled correctly.
This is the supervisor.
Oh. Wow. Wow.
There we go. Everybody else is wrong. I had classmates that their mothers did that. You guys just don't know how to handle the child. You expelled him because you did everything wrong. Which, it can happen.
Yeah.
But we just learned in this video, during the last 12 minutes of video, that she's not modeling how to regulate and respond to one's own anger when she deals with the child, and she and her husband are not modeling how to work out differences between each other, right, with each other in front of the child. They're not modeling communication and compromise and negotiation and settling on a decision, and so it's the school's fault.
Yeah.
So let's see.
I love that. School is not your babysitter, okay? They're not there to act as like the third wing of your parenthood. Like that's not what this is. I don't know. Say what you want, but honestly, there's women that think like this today. They just don't show as much restraint anymore. They're not as belligerent as this woman is right here. She's very stern and she's forthcoming with this doctor. But she's not, until we just heard her blame the school, she wasn't really like trying to put this off on anyone until she actually finally did.
Yep.
But women today, like that, would absolutely not be. They would be apoplectic. They would be down at the school cursing out the principal. Oh my God, you better take my kid back. So I'll give her some points for maintaining her couth.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I grew up in a community that's kind of like BFE, Ohio, and Ohio has a broad range of poverty and wealth. Like we have in some urban areas, we have millionaires. In some rural areas, we have people that have, like I had a classmate that his graduation present from his father, who ran a big farm, was a small farm. And at the other end of it, I had classmates that were raised by single moms, and we had a single mom come in when I was in elementary school, and my dad and my uncle worked in the junior high. My uncle was the principal of the junior high. I never got away with anything in school when I was growing up, by the way, because my family was there. But this lady came in hot pants and a tube top to yell and cuss at the principal over discipline that her child had faced. And I will never forget this because, like, at that point, I was in the 6th grade, so it was attached to the junior high. And my whole class, like, we were on our way back from, we had different classes that we went through the junior high to another building for, like, gym class and music. And my whole class is walking from a class to our normal classroom where we did, math and reading and everything. And there's this bleached blonde, like 30-something bleached blonde, walking, and flip-flops, like walking through the school like gangbusters, like she's gonna run in and just really kick some ass in hot pink hot pants, like almost but not quite Daisy Dukes. Hot pants are like almost like Mickey Mouse shorts. And like this was, if you looked at it with the wall behind it and the wall's kind of greenish blue, you would get a headache. Pink. And matching tube top and flip-flops just slapping the floor. Whap, 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 as she goes along. Then you hear her, she opens the door to the office and immediately started cussing at the secretary. And our teachers were like, kids, up the stairs, now. We didn't even get to stay in the hallway. It was, move it. And they just like tried to talk over loud enough that we didn't hear everything she was saying. She was so mad. And all it was the kid had gotten detention for something that was legit misbehavior. But yeah, like this parents now, modern day parents, the belligerence you have toward the school can range very widely from, well, they did it wrong. I was contacted by the wrong person. Like, Karens will Karen, but some of them are a little more blunt about it than others.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what the lady from the school...
the best ones end up on...
Oh, yeah.
the best ones end up on like police body cam videos.
Oh, my God.
Those are great.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. That's funny. JLM says, I'm seeing the blonde from My Name is Earl. My uncle's name was Earl. And he was one of my heroes as growing up. So I don't get to talk about him as much, but one day I will tell you guys the story of how he talked to me about my temper. He was very, very good principal and very good uncle. Well, let's see how the school lady talks here.
Of the nursery school, he was asked to leave.
He was the eldest in the class at this point, and somehow he wasn't up to the level of the other children. And not intellectually, only because he couldn't cope with himself or cope with anything that was taking place. The children were involved in learning things which required more attentiveness and a circle where they sat down for a period of time and discussed various things. And Philip realized he couldn't cope with this, so he would ask to go and visit a younger class. And we tried this on occasions. He came to visit various classes, but immediately became attached to one child and showed his affection by beginning to hurt this child. I spoke to Philip's mother and told her that unless she got some help, we couldn't manage to keep Philip at the way he was now. We were only equipped to do a certain amount. We were only trained to a certain level, and we felt that Philip needed more help than we could give him, or that we needed direction in helping Philip or in understanding Philip.
So there's a lot there. The first thing I noticed that she was describing there was that Philip was emotionally immature. Intellectually, he was fine, but emotionally, he was immature, which is kind of a consistent theme here. And it's obvious that there's sort of a well-rounded presentation of he's not getting the lessons at home that he needs to understand, to process his emotions and regulate his behavior based on that. And then she's also talking about having reached out to the mother and asked for some sort of cooperation, where what did we hear from the mother, but the school wasn't handling him right. and that she should have received a call from an administrator and not a teacher. Which is interesting, because if my son's teachers, or if my stepdaughters had lived with us and gone to school in our community, if their teachers had had an issue, it would have been the person experiencing the issue that I would have wanted to hear for, because I would want their perspective. So there's an economic difference there, I think, where she has grown up in an economic situation where everything is about hierarchy and authority rather than direct observation and collaboration, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You know what I thought about too, maybe is maybe he's just not being challenged enough in school.
Yeah.
Because that happens to a lot of kids, when the material is just not fast paced enough for them. If they're reading or thinking or doing math at like a higher level than what they're actually being taught at school, they're bored. They look for ways to distract themselves, ways to entertain themselves. I don't know if that's the case here, but I don't think that's normally accompanied with violence. So, I don't know, maybe there's something else psychological going on with the kid, or maybe it's just nurture. Maybe it's just way that he was raised, and the lack of structure and discipline and stability. Maybe that is really what's to blame here. But I know this happened a long time ago. I'm sitting here like, oh my God, this little boy was okay. He's probably a grown man now with grandkids.
Well, see, this would be, this happened in the 1960s, and he was probably approximately kindergarten age during the 60s. I was born in 1972, and I'm 51. So this kid would now be probably in his 60s to his early 70s. This is a baby boomer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if he's still alive, because a lot of boomers, when they were growing up, they were given a lot of bad dietary advice, a lot of bad healthcare advice, and like physical healthcare advice, and a lot of them ended up with diabetes, ended up with arthritis, heart conditions, strokes, and of course a lot of boomers, if they got into the hippie counterculture in particular, they ended up experimenting with a variety of different drugs that have different impacts on your health too. Like, some things don't, but stimulants can have a profound effect on your circulatory system, for instance. And so there's a lot of stuff that he could, this kid could already have been through his whole life, passed away, and be buried somewhere. Or he could be somebody's grandpa, somebody's living grandpa. But what's interesting to me is, like when you talk about, a kid getting bored and stuff, like he gets bored in school. And there's a progression in attention span with a small child. Like a 2-year-old's attention span is very short, and a 4-year-old's attention span is actually significantly longer. A 2-year-old may not sit still through, say, an entire television program. And really, your 2-year-old shouldn't be watching a buttload of TV anyway, but things like that, like you can hold a 2-year-old's attention if you have them sitting in your lap and you're reading them a book and you do character voices and things like we had a story that I liked called the Sneely-Mouthed Nerds and the Wonder Octopus, which was it's out of print now. I have a copy. One day I'll make a video reading it. But when you read that to a child, when I read that to my son, when my mom read it to me and my brother when we were kids, you do things like, the Wonder Octopus gets to the Sneely-Mouthed Nerds. You do kind of the claw on their belly or something along those lines, and And there's a lot of different voices you can do with different stories that kids like and stuff like that. And it's fun. And the kid pays attention. But if you just have, like, you couldn't lecture a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old is going to, their brain is going to wander off, and they might physically wander off because they don't have the capacity to pay attention to you doing that. And a 4-year-old might be able to sit in a circle with other kids and play a game and stay involved in that game for many minutes longer than, say, a 2-year-old. You really don't have to fight as much for attention. And by the time a kid is 5 or 6 years old, they're old enough for you to write a lesson on the chalkboard and demonstrate things, and they'll pay attention to that. And they still have to have breaks, and they still have to have recess and a change of subject periodically. Or you're going to get, boredom, and when they get bored, they act out. It doesn't necessarily end up with violence unless the child is also frustrated, right? And when the child becomes frustrated, from the time they're little until they learn from mom and dad and the other kids and their teachers and the other adults around them how to handle frustration without resorting to violence. Frustration results in yelling, flailing, punching, kicking, biting, dropping down on the ground and having a temper tantrum, things like that. It's just how it's expressed until you mature, and then you might sigh in exasperation or raise your voice a little bit or show tension when you're talking as an adult, but you regulate it. So it seems like this boy has not learned to regulate his frustration.
Yeah.
Just from the sound of this lady talking about it. And when she asked the mother how to handle that, and the mother's like, well, I should have gotten a call from the principal. Like,
yeah. It's your job to figure that out. Why are you asking me?
Yeah. So I like the way the psychiatrist said it seems like you're kind of trying to avoid the catastrophe of your kid getting expelled. Because that is a bit of avoidance. She's not wanting to take responsibility.
Yeah, and she really did not like that word loser, because it means that she's failing, and nobody likes to hear that about themselves. But, to be honest, that's the only way that you're going to learn and grow. That's the only way that you're ever going to know that you're doing something wrong, is if someone tells you, because obviously, well, hopefully, if you have figured out that what you're doing is wrong, you would correct your own course. But some people just need a little bit of assistance opening their eyes to reality.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, the father became quite hostile. He said he couldn't understand that if we were such experts in nursery school, why we couldn't cope with the situation. And we explained that we weren't such experts in, behavior problems, in the sense that Philip was beyond our understanding.
It's nice of you to join us. I thought it would be a good idea.
That's an interesting thing too. Her describing the father as hostile. If you're such experts, how come you can't handle this? And I suppose he was probably defending his wife, and it's hard to tell because we don't have him here. He was probably at work, but it's an interesting. That's an interesting response. And yeah, nursery school, there are facilities where the workers at a nursery school take early childhood development courses and stuff like that to get their jobs and everything. But in most cases, in a nursery school, in a preschool, they have very, it's like nurses' aides and direct support professionals for disabled adults and stuff. We don't get necessarily a buttload of training. We're not like nurses. They're not like school teachers, and they're not like psychologists. They're a lower level expert in a limited set of functions with regard to caregiving for children, because the use of their services is supposed to be limited. You're not supposed to rely on your child's preschool to be the bulk of their training on how to be an adult, on how to grow up. That's just supposed to be a contributing factor to what you're teaching the child. That was understood early on in the education system, but that understanding seems to have been utterly destroyed in today's education system. And I think part of the fault of that is mothers like this, during the 60s and the 70s, like my generation's parents, our generation's parents, that said, why isn't the school doing more for my child? Where in reality, it needed to be the parents doing more for the child and taking suggestions into consideration from the school, rather than the school being experts on this kid has a behavioral issue, and this kid has a health condition, and this kid has, conditions at home that are causing problems, and so on. Your school teacher shouldn't be your child's psychologist. Right. But that's what this mom was expecting, and the dad too.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like the kind of mindset of the type of wealthy people who think that you can just throw money at any problem and make it go away.
Yep.
And that's just not how kids work. In fact, quite the opposite. The more money you throw at them, the worse they get, or the worse they turn out. They just turn into absolute just degenerate ingrates.
Oh yeah. Like some of the best shaping experiences a kid can have are absolutely free. You take them to a public park, you let them play with other children, you let them make up their own games, and you let them negotiate the rules of those games with each other, and you only intervene if the behavior involved starts to deteriorate into unresolved violence, where the kids are not going to play together. And then you can say, hey, why don't you guys think about this? You can compromise. You can suggest things like that. How about you take turns making rules? How about you consider trying this rule and that rule, and see which one you like better when you play with those rules. And your kids learn that way. They take a little advice and they figure things out between, the group where they're discussing it, and they go back to playing. And, you can tell the kids, hey, it's not okay to hit when you're mad. Don't bite. Nobody wants to play with a biter. And that helps. But you don't have to be spending, a whole bunch of money to do that. You just let them play with other kids. But unfortunately, we don't seem to give kids that leeway in their play anymore. Everything is scheduled and outlined and described to the kids, organized. They don't make up their own games. They are put together on teams to play sports or be involved in dance class or piano class or whatever instrument, or they get into martial arts, or they get into this club or that club, and they're not negotiating with each other. They're doing what the adults tell them to do, or they get kicked out and they're excluded from everything. And I think we have completely forgotten as a society, and psychology, modern psychology seems to have forgotten as well, that we don't, especially with boys, although girls need this too, that we don't have to do that. We don't have to organize everything children do. It's actually better if they have to learn to work things out with each other and compromise with each other and bounce ideas back and forth and decide on things together. It's how you learn to be a co-worker and a partner in a relationship and a co-parent and part of a big family and enjoy family gatherings together, and so on. But yeah, we've stopped that, and when boys try to do those things, we call it toxic masculinity today. So I think that's one of the answers to our title name is we have forgotten that boys develop by experiencing their environments and learning from all of the people in their environments how to handle circumstances and their emotional responses to those circumstances.
Yep.
Play, darn thing.
Our understanding.
It's nice of you to join us. I thought it would be a good idea if we spend a little time talking about some of the things that I've tried to observe as I've spent a half hour or so with Philippe. And,
Yes?
you want to show your mommy what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about me telling your mommy what we're doing?
Yeah.
Can I tell her
Mommy, will you
too?
go and get those things and bring them over here?
Yes. You got a whole mouthful. But you like to play and eat and talk and breathe and grow all at one time, like a real hungry alligator. And I like this. Yes.
Aren't they cute?
This is a mummy and a daddy. And they've been playing a game most of the morning. What's the game they've been playing?
Husband and wife.
They've been playing a husband and wife game with a lot of kisses and hugs. Lots of kisses and hugs. So many that you think this mummy and daddy never raised their eyebrows at each other and never had an argument with each other, and mostly at breakfast time.
Oh.
When everybody had a whole lot of bacon for breakfast.
Really? Yep. Oh, nice.
So, apparently liking bacon is kind of universal. But it's interesting. It's interesting. You mentioned the showing of affection and the no raising their eyebrows at each other, and no fighting and stuff. I don't know. It seems to me it would be normal for parents to have at least differences of opinion and to talk back and forth and come to a conclusion. I always felt like my husband and I were a little abnormal for not getting mad at each other in those circumstances, because most people around us always did. But I think I married the most patient man alive, which is saying a lot because men are pretty patient in general. And I think I responded by being patient where I would have been totally different, right? If I hadn't been with somebody so patient. It's embarrassing to be the only person getting out of control in a disagreement. And it's doubly embarrassing if it's in front of the person you love most in the world. You don't want them to see you that way, right? But I think it's pretty normal for people to have tempers when differences of opinion don't get resolved quickly and easily. And I don't know. It's interesting that the psychologist talked about it that way.
That's one story that Philippe's been telling us, and he's been coming back to that story again and again. The daddy being a very, very amorous, affectionate husband, and with lots of kisses and hugs for mommy. And I think it's Philippe's way of saying that, when you can give a mummy lots of hugs and kisses, then your mummy becomes such a happy mummy. And when you were a little boy like Philippe with lots of hugs and kisses, then you can be not a fighting boy at school, but maybe a happy boy at school. But then, you see, we ran into a bit of trouble. Not really trouble, but game trouble. The alligator became very, very hungry.
Really?
And he wanted to eat up the daddy's head. And I think the alligator was Philippe. And I think Philip became very angry. But he says, I always get what I want. And that's why I fight. And I fight to get what I want, even though I sometimes never really get what I want.
Irish says I want that thing now.
You want it right now. And you don't think you can wait longer at all.
That's another interesting one, because what did the child just tell the psychiatrist with that story? I get rewarded for bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lifetime thing too. Adults will develop bad habits if they get rewarded for bad behavior. I've seen that in the workplace, and people who are older than me that learn to do things, I won't say wrong at work, but in ways that are detrimental to their work relationships, because they get rewarded for it. And it's like coworkers that will not just be like the boss's butt, kisser or things like that, but where they throw other coworkers under the bus, or they don't do tasks and they leave them for somebody else, or they gossip about you, things like that, and they get rewarded for it by advancing in the social hierarchy at work, or by getting promoted, or by getting praise from the boss for the job they're doing, and seeing the person that they feel competitive with getting the other end of that stick, where the boss is like, you should be doing this, and you find out that you have to be passive aggressive, or you have to be verbally aggressive, or you have to enumerate everything that you do, or you have to be competitive in ways that are unhealthy as opposed to ways that are healthy at work, in order to keep your head above water. Retail environments are really bad for that, and so are a lot of environments where there are it's instead of building things and fixing things and designing things and stuff, it's paperwork, bureaucracy type paperwork, like paper pushing environments, where what you do in your job isn't necessarily always visible to the boss. You get that kind of dysfunctional behavior being encouraged by management, and people who grow up learning to regulate themselves better in those environments, they end up becoming better workers, and they end up getting along better with their co-workers. But people who didn't learn that growing up, they're more likely to more quickly adopt the dysfunctional behaviors at work and disrupt the entire workplace because of that. I'm sure, Laura, and I'm sure you've probably seen that, because I know you have, even though there's the repair end and the sales end of your workplace, there's probably a lot of paper pushing as well.
Oh yeah, that's my job.
Yep.
But fortunately, I don't have very many females around that I have to work with. So the levels of toxicity outside of the chemicals that I have to ingest is pretty low. I've made mention of a certain coworker that was there before, just very toxic. This is just what you were talking about. I mean, she just slept with everybody around. But they finally let her go. I don't know what she did to actually seal that deal, but yeah. So it's a step in the right direction. But no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's interesting, Allison actually made a video on it too. She talked about the difference between female slackers and male slackers in the workplace. You give both sexes a set of tasks to do, right? And your workers, based on whatever their job function is, they're going to have a set of tasks to do. And most people will just systematically knock out those tasks, or they'll ask for help if they feel like they can't systematically knock out those tasks. But, you know, every so often you get somebody that has always skated by doing the minimum, and they don't systematically knock out their tasks or ask for help. They just let it fester, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that Allison pointed out in her video is a male slacker, if you pick up his slack, he's just grateful that you did. Right? Now you do the job, it's done, nobody's in trouble, you move on. And I've experienced that as well. A female slacker gets offended if you pick up her slack. And she feels slighted or defamed by you picking up her slack. Even if you don't crow about it. Like, as long as you're not an asshole about, oh, I picked up your slack again, you know, guys don't care. You know, unless you create conflict over it. They don't care. But women will stake their slack out as a territory and defend it, take ownership of it, and get mad at you for fixing the problem.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I mean, I experienced it with that chick. And you know what I find interesting, and I think, I don't know, maybe this is just becoming a product of what it's like to be raised by a single mother, but noticing the same behaviors in a lot of these young men too. You know, because the new crop that we have coming in, they're just irresponsible. They don't care. You can give them directions to the T, and it's like one thing, anything to distract them, and they get thrown off course. You know, and it's just, I don't understand it. And
Zoomers in particular.
Oh God, these guys. And you can't call them out on anything. I mean, like, I try to go back to these guys and say, listen, you're supposed to do this. I need this paperwork. You didn't turn it in. Can you please just can you get that for me and print it out and give it to me? Yeah. This guy, he took the paperwork from me, and he turned around. As soon as I turned around to leave, he took the RO and he threw it at his toolbox as if I offended him because I asked him to complete his job. I don't understand the entitlement, you know.
My boss with younger people has had to start every correction at work now with, "You're not in trouble, but I need you to do this." Yeah. It's just, and this is something I don't know what Gen X did to their kids. But a lot of Zoomers I've noticed, and some millennials too, like the younger millennials. But a lot of Zoomers seem to have a sort of cultivated neurosis and cultivated attention deficit disorder, where, like, I've seen real ADD at work. Real ADD is chemical. It's rare. It's not very common. But it's rough to deal with, and you need tools to overcome it. And for every person I've met that has talked about being, you know, ADD or having a diagnosis and stuff like that they got from their school and was medicated for it, you know, like I probably, for every person that's actually displaying symptoms of it that are obvious symptoms, I've probably met 20 or 30 people that have said, "Oh yes, I had ADD, grew up with ADD, I still have ADD, and this is what it does," and they're not. They just didn't learn to regulate their attention and to focus. And it's not that it's some people are high functioning and some people are low functioning. It's that some people are misdiagnosed. And the overwhelming majority of the ones that I meet that have been told, "Oh, you have ADD," and they don't, are boys. Right? And they don't learn the tools of, okay, somebody has said, I didn't do something I was supposed to do. I need to do that. I shouldn't get mad about it. I just need, I'm being given directions on how to do something effectively in my work. Okay, I can do that. Like, which is what, if you look at boomer men and even flower child boomer men, like the younger boomers and Gen X men for the most part, older millennial men, they all have that capacity. Hey, I need this bit of paperwork with your job. Oh, okay, I will get that done right away. No conflict, no problem. And then as you get into the younger millennials and the Zoomers, it's like you just told them that they are bad. Like, you're bad, you didn't do this. Shame on you. You should be embarrassed. And it's upsetting to be embarrassed. And I don't know what's different in how, like, I understand the whole helicopter parent thing and how that has affected, I see a lot of younger people not being willing to take normal risks because of that. But I'm not sure what changed aspect of parenting has happened between the generations that has led to it becoming normal for guys to approach figuring out that they've made a mistake, that looking at an error as a personal affront as opposed to an opportunity to improve. But I don't know, maybe people in the comments will, especially like if you are an older millennial who has younger cousins or younger siblings raised by younger Gen Xers, or such, that you've seen differences in parenting, like maybe you guys know. It's just not something. It's something I've observed in kids, but haven't figured out what aspect of parenting it's attached to. Like, what did we screw up that led to that?
This you can, please. I cannot. I don't
And
know.
are you getting to be a hungrier alligator, or are you getting to be an angrier alligator?
Now get the angry man.
That's the angry alligator. Do you ever get to be a sad alligator? A sad little alligator that says, I want something. I can't, and I want you. And do you ever feel that?
I want something to eat.
Right now. That's right. And I want to get that man right now. And I want to get the apple juice right now. And I want my daddy to kiss my mummy right now. So everybody can be real happy.
Good night.
Well, I'm going to get to sleep.
I wonder if this kid's parents are fighting in front of him and not resolving their differences when they fight. Or they're doing that silent... I've seen this with a lot of parents. They do the silent fight where they make the angry face where you draw your lips back towards your jaw like a grimace and lower your eyebrows at each other like, I'm angry about this, but you don't... It's sort of a non-communicative communication, and then don't say anything, motions and hand signals and stuff like that. And we have Babad said has noticed the boy is nervous of the camera. I noticed that too. He sort of keeps looking at it, and I suppose he's performing for it a little bit too. That's something, when I was young, I kind of learned to be invisible with my camera because of that. Because part of yearbook and news photography at events and stuff is getting candid photos, but you don't get candid photos if people pay attention to the photographer. You only get candid photos if people forget you're there. And so you have to blend in or, fade into the woodwork a little bit. And shoot when nobody's looking at you, and I managed to be able to do that really well. But I'm sure this camera's set up where the kid is prominently aware of it.
Yeah, it was pretty difficult to have hidden cameras back in the days when cameras were fucking 5 feet across or whatever they were.
Yeah. Well,
pretty imposing machines.
Yeah, and they were noisy too. They had the sort of a whirring sound, the old film because that would have been using. This was probably, let's see, in the 60s, probably done on 8mm. Could have been done on 16, but it was probably done on 8mm. It might even have been, if he had a really good camera, it might have been done on 35mm film. But yeah, you can hear it advancing. You can hear the film advancing through the camera. Well, you can't hear it in the film though. But yeah, he's definitely nervous of that. So the behavior that we're seeing might not all be genuine here.
How would you like to lie down in my arms and fall asleep in my arms? See how sleepy you are.
Aw.
Can you cuddle in my arms? Ah. And now you can be that little baby with one tooth. And I wonder, what's better? A big, hungry alligator that wants things, or a little baby with one tooth that can start life all over again and be cozy and comfortable? What do you like best?
So we don't see men getting to do this for children much anymore. I remember getting rocked to sleep by my dad when I was a kid. And, my son got rocked to sleep by my husband when he was a kid. But a lot of guys get treated like there's something wrong with their behavior when they are affectionate toward their children or toward children that are under their care. I remember hearing my parents discuss this. My dad couldn't give kids a pat on the back because they did a good job at school because he was worried how that would be taken. There just hit a point where that, the handshake, the pat on the back, the pat on the head, anything like that was like, oh, you touched my child. And personally, I think if we take away the concept of good touch from men, then we make it difficult for young people to understand the difference between good touch and bad touch from men, rather than and we take away a form of nurturing that kids need.
Exactly.
You think about it. There's a difference in the emotional response. There's a difference in the way it feels to be cradled by a masculine, strong man versus a woman. And it's nurturing from both, it's loving from both, it's affectionate from both, it's tender from both. But you do kind of get a sense of being protected.
Yeah.
More from a man.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if this doctor is also kind of trying to model to the mom, this behavior is important with your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And look at how open the child is to him. He's just very comfortable with the doctor. And remember earlier in the video where, when the doctor said to the young boy, "I love you," and he looked up at him like, "What?"
No, he was so hungry for that.
Yeah. So I think it's a great thing for the mother to witness, and hopefully she can, learn from that and not be jealous by the way the difference in the way the child reacts to this supposed stranger, rather than to his own parents.
Yeah.
So I really wonder if she caught that. I don't know. Or is she too caught up in her own emotion about the situation and, the frustration of not really knowing what to do? I think going through this whole thing is supposed to be helping her to learn. But it was just a couple of minutes ago where she was blaming the school for not being able to teach the kid. So,
oh yeah, and you think about it. Women respond emotionally to everything, and the emotional response becomes the primary issue at that point, and you forget about the situation that you're responding to, and your focus becomes your own emotions instead.
Yeah.
And it's if you don't grow up learning to, again, this is a self-regulation issue, and women do not learn that self-regulation, and that's like a historical thing. Men are naturally better at it, but they also, as they're growing up as boys, they get more training on it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's there's a huge difference in how that impacts how you respond to circumstances. Then of course there's also like, and it's not necessarily universal to economic. I hate to use the term privilege, but when you're talking about children, it is kind of privilege, because children they get what their parents have, right? So children who grew up in a more economically plentiful setting, a lot of times their parents are more indulgent, and it's not universal. I've met people who have grown up filthy rich with parents that were not indulgent at all, and they seemed more like the kids of working class parents. Working class parents can't afford to indulge their children. They can't afford to have the problems that come from indulging their children, but they also can't afford the materials it takes to do so. And there are tools sometimes, I think, that kids with parents that don't have the inner strength to refrain from indulging them when they're able to, and they are able to, they don't get the same tools that parents who have no choice but to say, no, we can't afford that, or you're going to cause problems for the whole family if you do that. You got to stop doing that. We can't afford the fine. We can't afford you to get kicked out of school, things like that. Those kids end up growing up with a better understanding of the impact of their behavior on other people, and they have better tools for that. I don't know. This kid, he may be being raised by parents that didn't learn to deal with difficult social situations because they never had to.
Yeah.
And so it's a generational thing, just like violence is a generational thing. Maybe his parents aren't affectionate because their parents weren't affectionate. Maybe they're not affectionate because their parents didn't teach them that it was important. But you saw how he sort of folded into and just settled into the care that the doctor was providing for him. Like, like a lady settling into a being pampered at a spa. Look at this, I'm being loved and cared about.
Yeah,
and
he was all in it.
A rare treat.
Yeah.
It's kind of heartbreaking,
Yeah.
What would you rather be? A big angry boy, very hungry, or a little cozy baby with one tooth?
A big alligator.
A big alligator. And the big alligator, is he happy when he wants all the things he can't get? Is he happy when the teacher's fighting with him?
No.
And when his mommy takes her slipper out? And when the daddy shouts? I don't think that alligator is such a happy little boy. Do you? I think he's a sad little boy, because he'd like to be a big boy that can go to the park, make bacon for breakfast, make his mommy and daddy happy.
Hold it.
Hold it.
Who made this? You did?
Yes.
We suddenly get into the kid distracting in a situation.
Yeah.
You're giving me a real...
But, and I think that's partly from hitting a nerve. The kid wants to be a grown kid, This I noticed too. I've seen this with other people's kids. I've seen this with kids that were kids when I was a kid, where the adults try to make them grow up too fast, mature too fast, and the result is that they end up. It's like when you pull on a rubber band, you let go, it contracts beyond, comes back and hits you in the hand, or stretch spaghetti and it goes back to its shortest state, right? He seems like maybe he's reacted to being stretched beyond his age of maturity by becoming more immature.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Bad Sad says, did anyone else notice him checking for his mom's reaction on Sad Little Boy?
I missed that.
Yeah, he's definitely needing the affection, and he's looking to see if his mother has noticed that he needs the affection.
Yeah.
And I don't get not being affectionate toward your kids either. Like, my kids had a nickname for you get they're so cute when they're little, and that cuteness stays with them their whole lives. You can see the little baby face under their grown-up face and everything. So there's a lot of moms will do this rapid fire kisses on the cheek or the top of the head and stuff like that, because you get this burst of affection, and so you give the kid a bear hug and just like I said, rapid fire little smooches on the top of their head or their cheek or the back of their neck, whatever. And my kids called those machine gun kisses. But and that's like, my parents did that. My aunts and uncles did that with their kids. My friends do that with their kids. My friends' kids and my kids do that with the younger set. It's just, you do. Little kids need affection. They need to know that they are loved and adored and cared for and protected, and that you want them to be close to you, and they need to be cuddled. Unless they have a reaction to it where it's like sometimes with kids who have autism or other disorders, it can be overwhelming and overstimulating. Then you have to, tailor your reactions to the child's needs. But most kids really need to be cuddled. And I have a feeling this one was not cuddled at home.
Yeah.
But let's see what else. We'll go one more scene here, and then I'm gonna look and see if there are super chows, because I haven't been normally with a lot of this. I've been trying to keep up with them as they go. I haven't seen any super chats, and so I've noticed a few chats that I've responded to, but no super chats. So we'll get into the Super Chow channel here in a minute. But first, let's go just a little farther with this.
A big hug. You had your arm
Now, here's
around me,
something for
hugging me
you.
for a long time, and now you made something for me. That's true. If I can do something nice for you, you can do something nice for me, and the alligator can be put away. And the hungry alligator isn't so important anymore.
He's dead.
He's dead.
Well, that's a pretty tender little alligator.
Very, very helpful to see him perform in this way, because you know that there is a tremendous need to be dependent and to be loved and to have kind of physical contact, which little boys this age should be able to have every once in a while. He's not quite as tough and as hard as he would like to, as he's tried to make people think. If he was as tough and as hard as he's made a lot of people think, he'd be in deep trouble. I don't think he's quite in as deep trouble as perhaps they felt he was at the beginning. People need some support and help as to how to handle him.
He needs to be treated like a little boy. A good deal of it.
Let's repeat that. This is something modern psychology has completely forgotten this.
To be loved and to have kind of physical contact, which little boys this age should be able to have every once in a while.
To be loved.
He's not quite as tough and as hard.
To have affection.
As he would like to, as he's tried to make people think. If he was as tough and as hard as he's made a lot of people think, he'd be in deep trouble. I don't think he's quite in as deep trouble as perhaps they felt he was at the beginning. People need some support and help as to how to handle him.
He needs to be treated like a little boy.
He needs to be treated like a little boy.
Patriarchy.
Like a little boy.
A boy. Yes. He needs to be treated like a boy. Like a
boys
little
will
boy.
not be boys.
It's the simplest answer. And yet somehow, like, these guys back in the 60s understood this. And today, modern psychologists don't get it. The education system doesn't get it. Little boys need to be treated like little boys. Not like defective little girls. Not like little men. Not like little monsters. Right? Not like little agents of the patriarchy.
Yeah, little potential rapists.
Not like little diseases. Little boys. Not like little behavioral problems. Little boys. Kids. Like, how hard is that? So we'll stop there, and we'll pick up there the next time. And I can't remember whether I settled with Prim on next week or the week after. So we may be back to this next week. We may be back to the article that we were going over with Prim next week. I'll wait till I hear back from her. I messaged her like right before the show, so we'll get that figured out. But we'll revisit this video one week or the other, and we should be able to finish it because there's only like 6 minutes left to it.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's see here. We have that's from the last show. So our first one here is Richard Bier at 6:21 p.m. So that would be right before showtime. Gave us $5 and said a military enlistment for the first time is technically for 8 years. I think that was the 10th. Okay, yeah, that was the 10th. So that would have been Tuesday show. Am I still? Okay, I'm higher up than I thought I was. We read that one during the Tuesday show. And that one's from the Tuesday show. There's done. Okay, we got a super chat during the Tuesday show that didn't go through for some reason. Anonymous said, if you want real news on the Israel and Hamas conflict, look up Ryan Dawson, Max Blumenthal, and Norman Finkelstein. Dancing Israelites and 9/11 USS Liberty. The day Israel attacked the United States, the ancient Christian miracle church said to be where Jesus performed the miracle of the loaves and fishes, also known as the feeding of the 5,000, was burned down by a Jewish arsonist. They tried to blame Palestinians. The Zionist arsonist got away with it. Fuck Israel and anyone who supports Israel. So there is their super chow. Since it doesn't have anything to do with today's show, I'm really not going to comment on that. Personally, the United States doesn't need a dog in that fight, so I don't want to really get involved in that. What I will say is, here we are, we're talking about a video in which psychologists have just pointed out that boys need to be treated like little boys when they are little boys. And we're doing it in an environment where...
To the shock of absolutely no one.
Right? our current news cycle includes our military in a nation that is not Israel, not Palestinian, not Russian, not Ukraine, right? We're none of those places. We are here, we're across the ocean from all of them, right? They're talking about needing to start drafting 18-year-olds who, in reality, in our modern society, are still boys.
Mm-hmm.
They are still boys. They are not grown up. No matter how much we want to differentiate between 17 and 18 because of law and policy, the reality is that until they are thrown into an environment where they have to, 18-year-old boys are not grown up. Right. And children mature more slowly. Modern children mature more slowly than children did years ago as well. But they want to draft 18-year-old boys and send them into those conflicts that have nothing to do with them and their lives and their country and the security of their homes. Nothing.
Exactly.
So that's my only take on it.
Meanwhile, they're trying to pass legislation that says that you can't own an AR-15 unless you're 21 or over. But you're perfectly fine to go off and die in whatever war that we decide that you need to go be, we need your blood on this ground today.
We'll give you paper straws with which to fight that war.
Yeah.
You're not old enough to buy beer. You're not old enough to decide whether or not you can handle a drink that is like 5% alcohol. Because American beer, a lot of it is really, really low alcohol. We used to even have some that was lower. We used to have high beer and low beer. Low beer was 3.2% alcohol.
Jesus.
And used to be when boomers were in school, like during the Vietnam era, if you were 18, you could buy 3.2 beer, and if you were 21, you could buy regular beer, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think you can buy non-alcoholic beer when you're 18 too, although I don't know anybody that ever tested that. But if I think I remember being told that you could sell non-alcoholic beer to any adult. Which, I mean, non-alcoholic beer really is non-alcoholic. It saes 0.5%, but there isn't actually any alcohol in it. They just have to put that on there just in case.
Okay.
So,
now I'm understanding. Because I'm thinking it's completely alcohol-free, and then what's the fucking point?
Yeah.
But it's like somebody stuck their finger in a bottle of whatever and swirled it around the bottle. So there's a little bit of alcohol in there.
Yeah, it's beer-flavored carbonated drink, basically.
Yeah.
And it's all a bit of a moot point anyway, because beer tastes like shit. It's like coffee with no caffeine in it. There's no point. People only like the taste of it because they get used to it.
Yeah.
And they only get used to it because they drink it regularly for the chemical effects of it.
If it's well made, it does have a nice flavor.
If beer doesn't get you drunk, it's just foul-tasting soda.
No, I actually, depending on how it's made, I do like it. I can't have it anymore, but I like it. Yeah, no, I screwed up some of my health in the last few years, and so no more alcohol. But yeah, I just, the thing that gets me is the juxtaposition, right? In an environment where we're being told about our military considering forcing our kids to grow up instantly at 18, right? We're looking at a window in history where they used to understand that in order to go through the process of growing up, boys needed to be treated like little boys while they were little boys. And it just hit me seeing that message. And I know there's probably a lot in there that we can respond to, I'm not even going to get into discussing the whole, the way people respond to Judaism and the discussions about Zionism and all that, that none of that has anything to do with the United States. You know, like we don't have a dog in that fight. That's between people in that area, and I'm okay with people, you know, discussing opinions on that and everything, but not when we're talking about whether or not our children have to get involved in at risk to their own lives.
Yeah.
Like, that's not their fight, and they shouldn't be forced to fight it.
Exactly. And let me just let everyone know, on behalf of the black people, we do not care.
Shouldn't. Why should you care?
We do not care, okay? And no American should. Oh my God, I'm so sick of this. And I would love to see this brought up in a debate. I don't think anyone would do it. Maybe Ramaswamy would do it. But yeah, Mr. Mike Pence, you care more about the Ukrainians than you do about America, right? That was your main goal, right? That was your main focus. All right,
main concern.
Yeah,
I believe you called it.
yeah. Well, now where do you stand? And the thing that I love even more about all of this are the people on Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it, that have the Ukraine flag and the Israel flag, the Israeli flag. Like, do you not realize that some of your people don't like some of your other people?
They don't. It's dumb.
It really is.
They've already have a rainbow flag in there. And they got a rainbow flag and a Palestine flag and a Ukraine flag. That's a dinner table conversation I'd like to hear.
I mean, just vote for your own destruction, why don't you?
Well, and yeah, I look at it from the perspective of you know, how I grew up, right? I've talked about, you know, growing up in a neighborhood where there was a park two doors down from my house, surrounded by houses with, you know, families that had a mom at home a lot during the day, and so the kids would be at the park, and the parents would be in the yards or in the kitchens looking at the park, but not at the park with the kids. And we fought things out, right? If there was a conflict and you got into an argument, you know, it could come to blows, and it could be that would finish. There wouldn't be someone come along, now you kids cut that out.
Yeah.
You know, unless it looked like it was getting out of control, and then a mom would come along and say, hey, what's going on here? Why are you guys fighting? How come you haven't settled this yet? You know, and what's the deal? And then we would tell her the two sides, you know, and then we would get, well, have you thought about X, Y, Z? Why don't you try this? Stop hitting each other and play. And you know, maybe the mom would go talk to the other kid's mom. You know, they're having difficulty figuring this out, you know. Once in a while there'd be an argument between moms. Your kid beat up my kid. But there wasn't this, you know, pampering, right? So sometimes you would see a situation where the kids would be out of sight a little bit from the moms, and you'd get a fight going on, and some dumbass little kid that wasn't involved in the fight would be egging one of the other kids, hit him, beat him up, you know, and maybe handing over rocks. Here, throw this at him, you know, stuff like that. The kid's not involved in the fight, but the kid is totally involved in the fight. And that's what the United States is doing right now. That's what our government is doing in our name. And the next thing that happens is the dominant kid in the fight, who is being, you know, either the kid that's being handed stuff and told, you know, hit him, or the kid that's getting hit and getting rocks thrown at him, one or the other, turns around and just clocks the little kid who's interfering in their fight. And then the kid learns to back off and not do that anymore. And, it's, you know, we have a government in charge right now that has weakened our defenses in an unprecedented manner, to an unprecedented degree, and is now the little kid, or even the big kid, you know, the big brother or big sister, that is standing off to the side, interfering in somebody else's fight. And one of these days, they're going to get us clocked. And then we're going to have to deal with it. And that's not fair to the American people or to the people whose fights we're interfering in. Maybe they would have settled their differences if we'd kept our nose out of their business.
Right.
Right? And in terms of... I don't know so much if we've done this in terms of Ukraine and Russia, but we have funded both sides of the Israel-Palestine fight through the use of taxpayer dollars and through the use of private citizen donations, which is just bullshit. We've fueled conflict where there could have been peace. And that's our fault.
I don't know how much
if
it is.
If taxes were voluntary, it would be our fault. But taxes theft.
And taxes aren't voluntary, but the politicians that we vote for, that is voluntary.
Well, yeah, this is where it's important where you use the word we. We have our taxes stolen from us to fund wars. But the government is not we, and I refuse to call, because this is a British thing as well. Like people often like to say, "Oh, we sailed all around the world colonizing it." I didn't do shit. Sorry, I didn't do it. I didn't do any of the good things that the British Empire did.
Well, when I say
I didn't do any of the shitty things. I just turned up. I was born.
When I say we, I'm including me.
My taxes get extracted by tyrannical bastards who then start wars everywhere. To that degree, yes, it is we.
Dude, I voted Republican all of my adult life. I'm guilty. I'm not. When I say we, I mean we. We, as Americans, we voted Republican or we voted Democrat. Not third-party candidates, not libertarians, not independents, not people who've come along and said, we need to be out of these wars. We need to not be involved in this shit. We have voted for people who have said, we have to attack because X reasons. No, we have to attack because Y reasons. I'm not innocent in that.
Well, see, I think you have to look at this from another level, because these things are all generated by power levels many, many, many times above just the simple politicians that we elect. That's like having a favorite Super Bowl or a sports team. You know what I mean? When you realize that the NFL owns all of the sports teams and they get money either way, no matter who wins or loses, then you kind of start to understand what we're dealing with. And this is what it is on a global level. The United States is it is the military arm of the globalists that want to control everything. The British are the finational arm of that.
Mm.
And then the Vatican, there's the Rothschilds and all.
Yeah.
Good Lord, the web goes deep.
Yeah.
When you understand how the power is doled out and who really controls everything, we're being played against each other, and
we've allowed it. We've never historically in the last couple generations, American voters never bothered to dig any deeper than, gosh, all of the media is saying this one thing, and we haven't seen any contradiction. We're not seeing any debate. Why is that happening? Until I guess Gen X did come along and start saying, hey, did you notice that they all start sounding exactly alike? And interestingly, the person who drew that to our attention is one of the most hated right-wing commentators of all time, hated by the left, and one of the most loved as well by the right, and that was Rush Limbaugh. He's the first place I saw a montage of the news media saying exactly the same thing in exactly the same wording across a multitude of channels, and he's like, it's like a communication went out. Everybody say this, and it was quite interesting, and he did that on his show multiple times. But when, for instance, when 9/11 happened, there were a lot of us that were just completely snowed. Didn't look any deeper than we've been attacked. This is an emergency. A lot of people were fooled by the babies getting tossed out of incubators story. A lot of people were fooled by, the whole deal of the propaganda that was around the attack and the connection between Al-Qaeda and Iraq and so on, which was a pretty loose connection in a lot of ways. And
no, because the real connection was between Al-Qaeda and the Bushes.
Right. But, and we voted for the politicians that promised the Patriot Act, which turned out to be the most invasive to the American civilian thing that our government had done so far. Obviously, they've done more since then. We voted to regulate ourselves in response to propaganda about an enemy attack. Right? We voted to have our government spy on ourselves in response to propaganda about an enemy attack. And it is not just our generation. The boomers voted for politicians that put people in camps here in the United States during World War II because of their nationality. Like, they didn't start systematically killing them, but they did put them in camps. Right? They spied on people for being the wrong nationality. They harassed people for being the wrong nationality, and they took them out of their homes and put them in camps because of paranoia. And it's happened generation after generation. And it's not just the taxation issue. We keep falling for this shit. And hopefully I'm not the only Gen Xer, and in my situation. Hopefully Lauren's not the only Gen Xer in Lauren's situation that we're going, hey, this is bullshit. Stop. Hopefully there's enough of us that are seeing the pattern, going, we can't trust anything the government says about this. We can't trust the situation. We can't trust the media. We can't trust the information that's being put in front of us. And we need to stop being used as a country as the world police. Mm-hmm. Because we're not any better than an officer that walks into a situation, 3/4 of which has already happened, and then makes a judgment call, a snap judgment call on the 2 seconds that he sees, and decides the wrong person is at fault. Or decides both parties are at fault when one is, or something like that. Or that there's nothing to be done when there was something he didn't see that was actually meriting arrest. We're doing that. We're letting that happen. And it's affecting our children. Our boys might be sent to fight in a foreign country based on information that might not be true. Propaganda. Some of it absolutely is not true. We can be 100% sure that at least a significant portion of everything we've been told by anybody commenting on this in the mainstream, the establishment media, the politicians, even people that are mainstream online, is either lies or stuff that they wrongly believe because somebody lied to them. Mm-hmm. Right? So, and it's not just boomers. Gen X has done this.
Yeah, no, it's much easier to let other people tell you how to think than to actually do the hard work, the heavy lifting, so to speak, of learning for yourself and researching and turning off the TV and maybe reading a book or something, but not enough people do that because they're busy living their lives, being comfortable, trying to get laid, trying to make money. They don't have, they're too busy trying to maintain some sort of sense of normalcy. They don't want anything else from the outside to come in and shatter that or threaten it. So of course and of course nobody wants to be seen as the bad guy. And what happens when you turn fear into a virtue? Well, then you look like a bad person if you stand out or stick your neck out and say, well, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. You become the pariah. And nobody wants to do that because we see what happens now. Cancel culture is here and it's not going away. You can't express a differing opinion. They're trying to do this to Carl Sargon of Akkad. He was expressing his opinions about the whole situation, and somebody comes out of nowhere, out of the Twitterverse, and starts to impugn his motives. And so he literally has to sit there and make a bullet point list of what he meant and why he said it. Because if he doesn't do that, then they're going to come for him again. They're going to try to get him canceled again. You are punished for being a free thinker or for going against the status quo. So it's very easy just to follow. Well, I stand with this one. Okay. I mean, if that's the easiest solution for you, if it makes you feel good, if it makes you sleep better at night, you stand with whoever you need to stand with, while we're over here realizing what is actually happening to us and not falling for the propaganda and the bullshit.
Yeah. Yep. And
remember when conscientious objectors were the outliers?
Yeah.
When there weren't many of them, and that was in the days when we had wars like World War II and actually getting invaded by Nazis and shit. And now all the wars are other people's problems. Mm-hmm. Everyone should be a conscientious objector to these kinds of wars, like Ukraine and Israel and whatnot. The vast majority of people in countries that aren't involved, which is every country except those two,
right?
Or those one and a half, whatever you want to say. Everyone should be a conscientious objector, but that's not how it works when the government is in control of the media and they tell you what to think, and you can't find anything else to think unless you look into the darkness, the abyss that is the evil internet. Like, people are trying to get along with their lives, but occasionally, just for shits and giggles, they turn on the TV to see what's going on in the world. That's how boomers used to describe it. Watch the news. Don't watch cartoons. Watch the news to see what's going on in the world.
Well, it was actually a vehicle for that.
Yeah, irony of ironies. Cartoons don't lie to us.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
They tell us, see what's going on in the world. That's not what's going on in the world. That's what your government wants you to believe. It is when there's this system where in Britain, every TV channel has to answer to Ofcom, which is this regulator for TV channels. And Ofcom answers to the government. So anything you see on TV, it's not just the BBC, which is directly just government propaganda. But effectively, everything on television is government propaganda because it all has to get filtered through Ofcom. And I assume it's the same in most other countries. Yes, you can say they're private companies, but they're private companies that have to answer to government regulators. So they're not private companies at all. And no, they can't do whatever they want. They have to do what the government tells them to do. And people just flick on the TV, let's see what's going on in the world, and they think they're being told the truth, when they're being told somewhere between a half-truth and a zero truth. That's all they ever get, and they think they're being told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't need to turn off the TV, but just when you hear something on the TV, go to the internet and see if you can get a second opinion from some kind of doctor. Not me, by the way. I'm not a real doctor. None of this is medical advice.
I'll give medical advice. Avoid lead poisoning. Don't go to war for somebody else's country. That's if you want my motivations in this, it's real simple. There's two things. I don't want to see another generation of American kids, mostly boys, by the way. The military is mostly male. About 14% of it is female, and most of the positions that actually go out and fight are male. Most women in the military do other things, and they're important jobs, but they're not frontline. They're not combat positions, right? A lot of them are in medical positions, so they might be kind of frontline, but I don't want to see another generation of American kids, mostly boys, do what my classmates did and enlist to go fight somewhere on the basis of an emotional reaction, and then find out later that they were lied to and tricked into it. And they did what they did for no benefit to themselves, their families, their country, nothing. Right? I certainly don't want to see a generation of young men, boys, and young men get sent overseas somewhere and have their future mortgaged by their government over the course of 20 years to replace a governing body with itself, like happened in Afghanistan. You know, I don't want to see that happen. And I don't want to see that happen to my draft-aged son.
Yeah.
So my motivations are caring about the youth of my country, and even more deeply, caring about my own family. Like, if that's going to happen to the kids that I watched grow up, and especially to my own son, you know, at least it should be for their benefit. At least they should be protecting themselves and their homeland, not doing something for no benefit to themselves and their homeland. We're talking about risking lives and risking minds, a lifetime of PTSD, injuries from explosive devices, and psychological injuries that can't even be quantified happening to kids. Like, it's not just a minor issue, you know, and it's not something that should be done lightly, and people are talking about it very lightly right now. And they're talking about it in terms of other people's interests and how important those interests are. They can fight for their interests, but it doesn't merit forcing or conning young people here into getting involved in that fight and being the kid standing on the sidelines handing one of the combatants rocks until they get clocked for interfering.
Mm-hmm.
Meredith G gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk 281. The point of talking about wars happening abroad on this channel is not about the geopolitics. It's about talking about the impact on men. Remember, the geopolitics is just how the power hungry get men to feed themselves into the meat grinders so the elite can get rich.
Right.
And I think we're going to have to do... I think I'm going to take Derek Workman's suggestion that we definitely need to do a future show on how to understand conscientious objector status, because I think we're going to need it.
Yeah.
I hope we don't, but there'll be... I can find some articles on the subject. I can find the official statement on what the requirements are and stuff, and we'll just read them and go over it, because it just, you know, young people should be familiar with that. It's very important to be able to look at your morals and ethics and decide whether you fit the requirements for that status, and if you feel if you feel like you're being pushed to get involved in a conflict that you have a moral objection to getting involved in, then you should be able to stand up for that. And you should be able to exercise your legal rights as a citizen to not be forced into that. So that'll definitely be an upcoming show and an upcoming discussion. We will finish the video and we will finish the article, so there will definitely be at least 2 weeks before we do that. And then, unless, they actually start enacting a draft, and then we'll prioritize the conscientious objector discussion. But that'll be our future episodes coming up. And with that, I don't know if anybody else has anything to say on the topic. But I think not.
2 hours is long enough for a sausage.
Yeah. So I will thank my 2 co-hosts for the thoughtful discussion, and everybody for listening to the thoughtful discussion. It sort of makes an interesting juxtaposition, the looking at how psychology used to understand little boys, and then talking about the environment that our boys are in now. And I thank everybody that works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.